go onto YouTube and share the link to the live stream
Yeah.
with people?
What do I search?
The Freedom and Libraries. You see me?
Yep.
Perfect. Hey, Stephanie. Yeah, this is me.
I just don't want to hit it or get it.
Oh, thank you. Trying to live stream and record it at the same time.
Okay, where would it be live stream? Your Facebook? Instagram?
Or YouTube.
YouTube.
Yep. Not done much with streaming, so no promises on the quality.
There's always a first for everything. Based on some emails that went around.
Nice to meet you.
Yeah. It's good to see you again. Hey.
Oh shit, that's the wrong thing.
It feels like this has been like a year. And you've recovered it longer than I have. Yeah. I mean, even back when I was first like heard about it in October, it was like yeah, like right, like I knew people, the core groups on both sides of the issue. Now it's like
It's wild.
like look, I'm like I don't even know how these people are here with the camera. Like, what station are you? It's insane. It's we didn't say there's no service in here. Where is it? What am I doing? Okay, just I was about to say. Gotta wait for it to go to completion.
Yeah, I know. Like I'm all.
Yeah, I'm like,
Yeah.
no, you're totally good.
Nope, that's not going to stick there. Anybody want a button?
I don't see any current members. Joe Dill is on the audience. I haven't seen any current county council members. I sit in the front row every meeting and I go like this. I like
I
lean
lean
in.
in and I'm like,
I like lean in and I'm like, I can't hear anything they're saying.
I know. And Steven told me they were going to get microphones. I was like,
Yeah, yeah. I like see them on the table. I'm like, pick them up,
pick
please.
them up.
Like,
Don't let them like also make that loud noise.
this is insane.
This is real fun.
Even more people. I've lost my photographer. See?
I saw him earlier. I was there. He is.
Oh.
Walked out to the stands.
Yeah. These are new. Greenville is a conservative community. The crowd looks evenly divided.
It really does.
Mike in the America's Got Talent position. But, I appreciate everybody coming today for the budget discussion, and thank you for all being here. I would appreciate it if we could keep the noise down, and not just to a dull roar, but all the way down, because we have to have a meeting, and we can't have a meeting if everybody's talking, and if everybody talks and they make too much noise and we can't have a meeting, then I'm going to dismiss the audience and we'll have our meeting. Everybody understand?
Yes, sir.
Thank you. I have the invocation is to be offered by Brian Hoffman.
Let's pray. Heavenly Father, we thank you for gathering us here today. Pray that you will give us the grace and the wisdom that we need to make the decisions we must make today. I also pray, Lord, that we will remember your command to love our neighbor. And as the story of the Good Samaritan tells us, our neighbor is often those who look different, think different, and believe different than us. And we also pray, Lord, for the people of Turkey and Syria as they continue to recover from their horrible earthquakes there and deal with the outcome. Pray all these things in your holy name. Amen.
Okay, the next thing we have is approval of the minutes from the last meeting. We have a motion to approve and second. Anybody have any discussion about it? All in favor say aye. Aye. All opposed? Motion carried. Next thing we have, change up the order. We have the Library Finance Committee report. Let's go ahead and do that.
Good morning. Good morning. The library committee met last Tuesday, I think it was. Wednesday. All right, and we did the finance committee meeting. We had a few changes that you can see on the agenda. It shows that we did the budget. We talked about the Blue Ridge Library conceptual project, which was the engineering part of it, and then we decided to add later Treasury bill investment option. Stuff get done here. I'll let Don, we'll start off with the proposed FY24 operating budget, and let Don come in and explain us what we're going to be doing on that.
I just give you a very high level. I think you guys all have a copy of the budget, so just a very high level view of this. We'll be we're anticipating. Okay. Just a very high level. You guys have already gotten copies of the budget, so you've had time to review it. This is coming as a recommendation from the Finance Committee. But on a very high level, our millage rate is staying the same. There's no rollback this year. It is 6.8 mils. So with the millage increase, the value of the mill increased about $162,000, which will generate about another $1.1 million in additional revenue for our budget this year. On page 2, you'll see that our total revenues coming in this year is $24,210,000. Of course, that's the same amount as our expenditures because we're required to present a balanced budget. However, you'll see on that same page 2, just above the $24 million item, we got prior year fund balance usage of $1,562,000. That's what that says is we're going to need $1.5 million of our current fund balance in order to present this balanced budget. So our revenues, projected revenues, are still slightly short of what we anticipate our expenditures to be. So overall, that's nothing big changes from most of this is just standard items that we've got carrying forward into our budget. You did get a list of the new items which we presented to you separately. Those items are all included in this budget, but other than that, I'll take any questions if you have any about the budget.
I had a couple of questions since I was unable to attend the Finance Committee meeting. And some of these might be for Greg to answer about as well. I know it'll probably be some time before we move into a new location. Is that parking lot in such ear repair right now that it needs to be done?
Yes, yes.
And then similarly, kind of on the grounds and maintenance thing, I know one concern that Bill's raised in the past is some of the landscaping on some of the branches could use a little freshening up. And I noticed that our grounds budget is the same as previous years. Have we looked into any more doing additional grounds maintenance improvements?
We've been focusing on using our current staff to manage the situations, and we have not. We can't hear. We're working on maintaining everything we have. We still can't hear. We're working on maintaining everything we have with our current staff, and we have not sought quotes from landscaping services yet this time.
But we are looking at doing some improvements to some of the landscaping.
Once we get everything under control that we have, we can address all of our issues so that we can be prepared for something new to happen. Ends up being the case. Then we come up with the bringing to the building and grounds commission committee.
And then one other thing, in terms of staff development, I noticed we've got some increased funds for staffing agency, some applicant testing, things of that nature. I also think we should look at some additional funds for developing our current staff in terms of additional staff trainings, and things beyond just speakers for staff day.
Yes, we could use the professional training and travel budget incorporates things like that. We've been doing in-house supervisory training and making sure that staff momentum is great.
So we can look at increasing it later, or spending for some way to do it later. We need it.
Oh, excuse me, we didn't ask for an increase in that line because we haven't had opportunities to use what we've got already. So if we've got the capacity to take on at this point.
I think my greatest concern is security. Being a child and being a principal during the time Columbine hit, my greatest fear always was safety of children, the staff, etc. I'm asking the same for the staff of our libraries, for every patron that walks in the door. And we have very little of that.
Could you please
That's a constant fear of mine that we just don't have the safety measures that we need, not only in Maine, but all branches. We can't do it all at one time. It's going to take time to do it, but if the school district of Brayville County can do that for 125 schools, we ought to be able to start with it for the 12 systems that we have as well. So that's the greatest gift that we can give our staff and patrons is safety.
Okay, is there any way we can look at, addressing that problem slowly as, Tony's talking about? What's in the budget right now for that? 20-something?
Yeah, we did increase that contracted security line item this year so we can provide for security at committee meetings and at the board meetings. And we've got another few $1,000s in there for adding security as needed on an as needed basis this year. So we have increased it some, but not to the extent that Tom was talking about.
But I think Tommy mentioned that he wants to do it gradually, not all at one time, so I think we can look at trying.
I don't think we have the money to do it all at one time, but it's gonna have to be a gradual thing. But every building needs to have that security for staff and patrons.
So I think what we need to do, we can look at doing it slowly and probably look at the budget, see if we can find some way to do it doing one at a time. Is that something we can look at doing? I'm sorry. So if we look at doing that, looking at trying to help Tommy on that problem, what he's talking about.
Yeah,
I understand what he's talking about, it makes sense.
Yes, we can look at doing that.
Okay.
I mean, now if you guys don't add any money into the budget this year, we can look at it over these next upcoming months and present it to something, a formal plan for next year.
Okay.
When we do the budget at that time. We did increase it this year some as an incremental step, and we can do some more investigative work to see what it's gonna cost and put some numbers with it.
All right. Tom?
No, it's a start.
Okay.
It's a start, but it's not something we can sit around and
Okay.
wait on forever. Because every minute is precious, really, for safety of everybody, really.
Yeah, you're absolutely correct. I totally agree with you.
We have talked to the school district, how they went about it, Greg and I have, and, you know, they have, they got some grants. They worked out security with Greenville County Sheriff's Department, with splitting the cost of monitoring the buildings, particularly for high school and middle schools, but, you know, and it's working for them, and they've also added electronic equipment in each school, as they've gone along. So, you know, and that's great, and we can do the same.
I mean, they started out with, one or two, those scanning items, and then took them to different schools till they got them in all the schools, got them together in all the schools. We can look at doing something, that nature too. But I would like to start at one location and then go out from there to the others, till we get them all.
That would be great.
That's something we'll keep looking at, and you can make sure that, I want you on board with that too, when we start looking at that.
Thank you.
Tommy, all right, I have a question. The scanning devices, how are those normally used as far as, is there staff that then step in if the scanning devices catch something? Or is it linked to a different kind of security system?
Yeah, particularly in the high schools, that is true, it's a walkthrough type of thing, for students and staff and all concerned. The elementary schools do have, sheriff's deputies monitor, not every day, but they do come by, but then you've got to go through, you cannot walk into the building without security, you know, monitoring.
I think the school district also has only one way to come in. You have to come in the front entrance, all the rest of the doors are locked. You gotta come in that front entrance, and teachers are all around watching everybody when they come in.
Yeah, you've got to ring a bell before they let you in. And then you cannot go into the main building anywhere without them unlocking the door for you to do so, to go to a classroom, et cetera, for a meeting.
Well, I'm just asking this because I know you said that you've spoken to the school board, to Mr. Hester. Would the budgeting also have to include additional security staff or some kind of connection with Greenville law enforcement or anything like that? Or is it just the scanners themselves?
No, I think you need personnel as well as scanners, but I think that's down the line. You're not going to do everything at one time. But, you know, some of our branches are within city limits. And I think, for instance, maybe Greer High, Riverside High Schools that are in the city limits of Greer, and the Greer Police Department helps monitor that as well. So, you know, there's ways that you could look at it, but you have to explore. We've got to start somewhere. We can't sit where we are now. That's not an option to me at all.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree with you. I was just interested in kind of talking about first steps and doing research over the year. I didn't know how large of an enterprise the scanners were. If it was just the scanners or also additional personnel.
I'll be glad to help look into it. I wanted to, but I held off until I could talk to the board and see what we could do, and then, you know, I can make contacts and see how things go, and the cost, et cetera, et cetera. I don't mind doing that.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Ken.
Thank you too, Tom, for that. Do we have any more questions, Joe?
For Don, just to confirm, for FY '23, so current budget year, we budgeted 1.8 million in fund balance, but we're projecting to use none of that, correct?
That's
Is that
correct.
accurate?
As you know, we budget conservatively based on the value of the mill at its value by We take that number and multiply it by the 6.8 mils, and that's where we come up with our revenue number to start with. We build the rest of our budget. Our tax collections are generally much higher. The county does budget conservatively, and we follow that pattern as well. So generally, we receive more in revenues than we are currently budgeting, which will eliminate, and many times eliminate the need to use our private fund balance.
Do we just not, I don't wanna beat the dead horse, but I'm still not exactly sure what just happened. On the security thing, do we need additional funding to like have a study or done to hire outside professionals? Or I'm not sure that's something that we need to be trying to do, unless we know that we know how to do it. I don't know if Greg's here. I'm not sure how the district did it, but what do we need?
Well, there are.
Since we have a break in the discussion, let's save the security discussion for when we're gonna do something about it. I mean, it's kind of tangential, but I understand it's gonna be part of
I'm
that.
only asking from the funding perspective, yeah, like, I agree with you. I don't want to go down there, but we need money.
I don't think we need any money that we can't find from something else for, you know, for a small study or something.
I think that's what you're talking about, is just for a study at this point, to see how we go with it.
Why can't the parents hear about safety?
Why can't what?
You don't want to talk about safety, but you have a large crowd of parents here who use your facilities all the time. We're concerned about safety.
The discussion today, right now, is about the budget, and we're trying to pass a budget. So, is there any more discussion about the coming from the finance committee?
Let me make sure, Joe, are you satisfied with the answer we have about waiting for a later time to talk about the budgeting part? But we know we're gonna look into doing it anyway. You okay with that?
Yeah, I just wanted to make sure we didn't need to appropriate funds to proceed. If that's not an issue, I don't think this is, that's really a deal. Sounds like we have the money to do it.
Can't hear you.
Okay, if you're okay with that, then are there any other questions that pertain to the FY budget? No more, any other discussion? If not, I'd like somebody to propose a motion to accept that.
Yeah, coming from the finance committee, so
Oh, you second.
doesn't need a motion. So if there's no more discussion, we'll just go ahead and vote on it. All right, everybody in favor of the budget as presented, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Thank you. That carries. Got, you taking the Blue Ridge Branch Library Conceptual Project?
Yes, we talked about this in the finance committee meeting. This only does funding that will look at the engineering, conceptual, and drawing part, and that's all it's going to do. It's going to give the executive committee permission to go to the engineering firm to get drawings and things like that, and that's all it does. And we need the okay funding for that portion of it. Isn't that right? Bill?
It's a budget estimate at this point, yes, we haven't started drawing yet. This is a starting point, and as things develop with the building layout and design, we may have to come back. May have to come back to you.
Okay.
People need to learn to use your outside voice. Nobody ever told me not to. Yeah.
The microphone in front of your face, constantly, right on the side. Bev, let me clarify what I think you said, that the money that we are proportioning here is not causing them to do the plans, but is what they could spend if the plans they submit are approved. Am I missing something?
The number, the 4.7 million figure covers right now, is an estimate for them to do the work with the building, erect the building, get it out of the ground. Given that we do not have bids from a general contractor at this point, we've not sought bids, we don't have anything for them to bid on yet. But at some point, as things develop and we get closer and closer to details, then we may have to come back and ask for additional funds. This is just a starting estimate, and we give permission to, so we can start drawing to get to what the real figure may be in the future.
Yes, I understand. Do you understand, sir?
Yes, I do.
Good.
I just want to point out, I was really confused by that too, at the committee level. We're not actually voting to do anything yet, other than say, keep drawing.
Draw,
That's it.
draw, we'll think about it.
Any other questions?
Okay, it's coming out of committee again, so no motions necessary, a second is necessary, excuse me. Any more discussion about that? Mercifully no. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Same sign. No. Okay.
Our last item, it's going to be a very good thing for the library itself, because we're going to use some funds that was laying in an account. Joe made the suggestion that we take that money out, stop doing it, just sitting in there, put it in treasury funds for short-term investment, and it will make money for the library without even having to do anything other than move those funds into a treasury fund account. And then for short-term, 6 months, 8 months, 12 months, and then put the money back into the account. Isn't that right, Joe? Did I say it right?
Yeah, that's right.
Okay, good.
And we will not get to a point where we say, oh, we can't pay our employees because we don't have the funds because they're tied up invested?
As long as Don is good at math, I won't. What we've done historically, right, and I'll say this, I think probably everybody on the board knows it, but maybe some of our visitors don't. Our funds are received primarily in January and February. Almost all of the cash that we get for the year comes from the county in 2 large lump sums. And then we have a very, very, very predictable expense flow, because obviously our largest expense is salaries, benefits, and all of that stuff is very predictable because it happens at known pay periods throughout the course of the year. We do have significant other expenses, but things like book purchases, those other big ticket items, we also have very good visibility because they tend to go on the same cycles, because publishers publish at the same time and that kind of stuff. So we have a lot of money that just sits dormant, but we know when we're going to have to spend it. In the past, what we did was we used what are called CD ladders, which are just short-term investment vehicles that mature on, we actually had them maturing monthly. And so we would make sure there was always enough money maturing before we spent. And we were conservative. We didn't even put all, I think we put like a quarter maybe of the budgeted money even into CD ladders. So this would raise the total investment threshold to what we can invest in either CD ladders that expire short-term or short-term treasury bills and allow us to earn higher maturity on it, or higher interest, other than, of course, right now sitting in bank account and earns nothing. I feel very, very, very confident we will not be in a situation where it's like, oh, we're not playing the interest rate game, oh, interest rates went against us, we thought we were gonna make money, now we have to sell these treasury bills before they mature, to pay payroll, oops, we just lost $200,000. And as long as we hold them to maturity, you can't lose money.
And we're going to do the same, we need to see the ladder, we only use a portion of the money, not going to take everything.
Correct. I think our limit was $8 million, if I remember correctly. $10 million. So 10 of a total budget of 24.
So it's not going to deplete the account out just by the short-term loan. Give us an income.
Mr. Baxter, the only other thing that I'll add is these are obviously public. The only other thing that I'll add is these are obviously public funds, and they can only be invested in certain ways. So even with the CDs, they're backed up by the FDIC, the Federal Deposit Insurance Corporation, and these would be the Treasury securities, which are paying higher rates now than the CDs are backed up by, as they say, the full faith and credit of the United States government. So these are not risky investments.
All I still listen is win-win. Are there any other questions from the board?
it's coming out of committee again, so it doesn't require a second. Is there any more discussion? All in favor of the Treasury bill investment option, say aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign. Okay, we'll go on down and get the executive director's report this time.
I'm requesting the use of contingency funds up to $15,000 to add a non-slip texture to the sidewalk at the public entrance of the main library.
Okay, is there any discussion or questions for Bev on that?
This, texture, is it something like an overlay over the concrete or something? What is it?
Greg is nodding his head yes.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, no more discussion on that? Well, entertain a motion for that. Have a motion and a second. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Opposed? Okay, we'll have a no-slip entrance. Any new business or unfinished business? Okay, let's move to the issue of the day, the Library Materials Committee report.
All right, the Library Materials Committee met March 13th, but the entire board was present. So I'll make my summary very brief. We'll start with the relocation of PEC collection. In November, the committee had brought forward a recommendation to move any of the PEC, which is the Parenting and Early Childhood collection. They are books for adults that can be used in parenting. And we made a motion to move all of those books into the nonfiction areas of each respective library. Not every branch has a PEC section. This was just for the branches that had PEC. That passed the full board in November, but Ms. James informed us that patrons were having a hard time accessing it at Main because at this location it's on a second floor. So the Materials Committee is recommending that at the main location, a special area be made on the first floor to house the PEC collection.
Okay. For those of you who were not privy to the earlier discussion about this, at one time the PEC collection, which is, as you said,
Parenting and early childhood.
parenting and early childhood, it's a section that would have books on potty training comes to mind. I remember there was a big discussion about that, which was the highlight of the day. But those books have material in them that's not appropriate for children, and that's the reason they're in the parents and early childhood section. And that section is part of the adult section. So it's made sense to somebody at some point that they put those books in the children's area, although they're not cataloged in the children's catalog. They were in the children's area because parents of small children would be with their children in the children's area, and they may want to pick up one of those books from that section of adult books that is not in the children's catalog area, but is in the children's physical area in Maine over here. And so what the problem was that when someone came into the children's area and they pulled out a book that had how to speak to your children about sex or something like that, they said, oh, my goodness, this book is in the children's area, which technically was correct because it was in the children's area, but it wasn't cataloged in the children's section. I'm sorry to be so tedious about it, but that's what the problem was, is that those books, they weren't moved out of children's and into adult. They were already in the adult section of the parenting and early childhood section, and it just made sense to put those out of the children's section so there was no question as to whether we had inappropriate books in the children's section. So those books were moved to the second floor of the library, which is where the adult nonfiction area is, and that made those books a good bit of distance away from the children's area, which everybody that has children or grandchildren knows is around the library on the first floor over there in a section where those other books have been at some point. So that's what the discussion is here, and we're going to move those back on the first floor, but not back into the children's area, but in an area which is easier to get to while they're on the same floor as the children's area.
Are there any questions about the proposed area just next to the Holds books and the magazines for adults?
Just for clarification, so we will be doing is moving the parents and early child education books. We're gonna move them to another area, same floor at the children's section, but just move them away from that section. So if a parent had a child and was looking at books in the children's section, they're gonna have to leave and go to another section altogether now. But their kid, look at books for their potty training or whatever. That's what's gonna happen now. Just goes through.
They're going to have to go to a different area of the library than the children's area, but they're going to go to an area which is closer to the children's area now than where we moved them previously. We're trying to correct the distance problem.
Any other questions or discussion regarding the PEC collection in the main? It's only affecting the main branch.
Okay, this is coming out of committee, so it needs no second. No more discussion on this. All in favor of the move, say aye. Aye. All opposed, say aye. Okay, thank you. All right, the next thing is the collection development and maintenance policy proposed revisions.
All right, again, I'll try to keep this pretty brief. We brought forward some suggestions regarding relocating books on certain topics. We've noticed that what publishers are comfortable publishing for younger and younger readers is not something that all of the parents in our Greenville community are comfortable with their young readers reading. We are not proposing to remove any books. We are merely recommending relocating some that deal with certain topics or have certain characteristics. So you all have a copy of the changes in front of you. It does not have the entire policy because there are no changes to the policy itself. Nothing is being removed from the policy. It's just, this would be added to our existing policy.
Books on what topics and characteristics?
Okay, we're not taking questions from the floor. Sorry.
So we're going to open it up for discussion on the board. I have a proposed amendment myself, which I think if we open it up to changes or amendments, we're going to have to make another motion before we vote on it. Do I understand that correctly?
That's right.
Okay. Does everyone have it in front of them? So on everything's on page 2. I'm going to thank the audience for bearing with us. I think eventually everything will be said out loud, so if there's any questions, that should all be addressed going forward. Right now, point 2, I'm proposing an amendment that would change that to say, material that deals with gender identity as a primary subject. We're not trying to limit one point of view on that topic. The goal really is recognizing that any conversation on gender identity, whether it's from one perspective or another, is something that parents are going to want to have control over when their child is exposed to it and how they learn about it. So that would be a change. Same thing with motion 2, point 3. My proposed amendment is changing that to materials that deal with gender identity as a primary subject. And if there's any other discussion, I assume there is. We can start now.
Read that again, if you.
Absolutely, Tommy. So, Mr. Hughes asked me to read that again and clarify the area I was talking about. Mr. Hughes, in motion 1, number 2, the amendment would change it to say, this is just to clarify based on some of the communication that we've gotten over the past 2 weeks. Material that deals with gender identity as a primary subject. Motion 2.3, the same thing. Materials that deal with gender identity as a primary subject. I'm sorry, thank you, Mr. Hill. My second proposed amendment or change would be, we have a clarifying, a paragraph that defines what these mean. For the purpose of the policy, I'm proposing we remove gender transition ideology is anything that affirms that a person's gender is other than that person's biological sex at birth. That sentence would come out of both motions, okay, for clarity. So that's not a change. The change is removing it entirely.
Everybody able to follow that? Okay. So there's a recommendation that comes from the committee, and then there's a motion to amend that recommendation as Ms. Collins just stated. Is there anyone who second that motion? Okay, we have multiple seconds, all right? Okay. No, that was just the motion and a second to approve the amendment that she just made to the Materials Committee's recommendation. So now I'll open it up for discussion. I figured it'd be better to go ahead and get the out of the way so that the discussion will be pertinent. Yeah. Okay. Has anybody got any discussion about the motion or the recommendation as amended now?
Can you read it one more time? Sure. Just I get not the we're taking.
Do you want me to read it as amended?
Yeah.
The full thing?
No, just
Yes. No, we will. I promise we'll read it before we vote on it. I just need to be able to answer questions from the board.
yeah, just that piece that we're.
Okay. So, if I don't answer your question at any point, you let me know. So, motion 1, which focuses on the juvenile collection. Point 2, material that deals with gender identity as a primary subject. And then you said not to worry about the part that was removed. You got that? Motion 2, which is the young adult collection. Point 3, the same wording. Material that deals with gender identity as a primary subject.
Thank you.
That wording seems a little vague to me. I know in our children's section there are probably books about I'm going to be a big sister or I'm going to be a big brother. That would be affirming that their identity is a sister or brother.
Okay, any other discussion?
Have we had any legal review of this proposed wording?
No.
Have we gotten any, I'll call it, have we given library staff that focus on collection development sufficient opportunity to weigh in on this policy?
No.
Okay. I'm going to move that we send this back to the committee with a specific charge, and I'm fine putting a time limit on it to get legal review, because I raised objections on First Amendment grounds previously, so I'm still concerned about that. I think we've gotten a lot of commentary on that, and I think we lack clarity of wording. communication prior to this now. So I think I'm gonna ask that we either send it back to committee or we can table it at the board level either way, so that we can deal with those two specific issues. Can we get a legal opinion on First Amendment conformity or compliance? And then two, to offer collection development staff opportunity to provide feedback and input. And again, I'm fine putting a time limit on that if we need to. This is not a closet attempt to boondoggle this forever, period.
Okay, there's a motion on the floor. Brian seconds it. Let's go ahead and vote on that motion. All in favor of the motion to table the subject, we'll have to do it. Show of hands, I think. To make this work. So everybody wants to, I'm not sure exactly what your motion was, to table it or to send it back to committee.
I think the motion is to table it at the board level for two specific reasons. One, to complete a legal review to determine if it is First Amendment compliant. And then second, to table it at the board level until we have given collection development staff at least 30 days to review and provide feedback.
Will we have discussion on that motion?
Yes. So we've got a that's a motion. Motion to be.
Before that motion, may I offer a amendation?
Well, there's been a motion and a second, so you'll be in the discussion part. Go ahead. Go ahead.
I was going to say, I move that the current proposal of amendments to the juvenile and young adult collection policies be referred to the Materials Committee for revision. The Materials Committee is to have a meeting prior to the 24th of next month so that they can present to the library board a revised proposal.
That's what you would move if the time were right to do that.
Is that a proposed amendment to the motion? Because I'm happy to second that amendment. I think we're on the same page, and that may be the more fitting avenue at the committee level.
Okay, let's go ahead and cleaner. Let's have a discussion on Joe's motion with what Mr. Mason said, the lead off of that discussion, and let's see where we're going with that. So, is there any other discussion regarding Joe's motion on the floor right now?
It's my understanding that even if we pass it today, it can still go to committee for amendments and clarity. Is that correct?
That is correct.
I do think we have a long-standing, I don't think it's a policy, but I think at the board level, we've had a long-standing tradition of not amending policies more than once in a 12-month period, because obviously we create this ping pong effect. I also think the questions being raised are of such a significant nature that to take action first and then kind of try to clean up the mess after the fact risk substantial, to me, exposure that is it's a lot harder to fix after the fact. I think we'd be better off, again, I think Bill's suggestion of putting some time limits on it or specific reporting dates is appropriate, but we're talking about very, very grave questions that get really expensive if we get them wrong. So I think we need to take the time to get it right.
I'd like clarification regarding your concerns about exposure.
Yeah, I mean, we went through a First Amendment issue a number of years ago. I really don't, I think it was 2019, 18, I don't know, somebody in the board may recall. And all sorry if any of y'all are lawyers, but all lawyers are expensive. But First Amendment lawyers are particularly expensive. And this was the advice that was given to us by it's an opinion, but it's not really my opinion. I'm just repeating what our legal counsel advised us, that First Amendment cases are extremely expensive and they're very lengthy. At the time, I believe what they number in the hundreds of thousands just to litigate a case, and I think that's the exposure. Don't get this right, then we're in a position where we're having to defend a lawsuit or settle a lawsuit, or all when we can take an additional window of time to get legal opinion. And I think, I don't know what lawyers are going to say. If they come back and say, hey, this definitively is problematic, then I think we got to consider that. If they say it's not problematic, then we can say, okay, hey, we've moved forward taking the steps that I think a reasonable person would expect us to take. Otherwise, we're just kind of doing something and hoping it works out, and it could be really expensive, which is just not. Whether you agree or disagree with the policy, I don't think that's a responsible use of taxpayer dollars.
Mr. Chairman, there are
Whoever is continuing to speak up, if they would please leave, I would appreciate it. And if the rest of you want to stay, then you might point out who it is that's continuing to offend, because they're going to make everybody leave in a few minutes. So
there are other options to accomplish the goals of this, which have not been necessarily considered, which would be less likely to deal with First Amendment concerns. They would not make a lot of people happy, but there are other methods that the committee could consider.
okay, so any more discussion on Joe's motion?
Has Joe's motion been amended by Bill, or are we just voting on Joe's original motion as well?
Joe's original motion.
Joe's original motion, just table on the board level.
Bill's motion was in the form of a discussion about Joe's motion.
So first we're going to vote on Joe's original motion to table.
Then I can make a motion. Then I can make a motion after that.
You're assuming I'm going to fail here.
Just days like this, I wish I had my Robert's Rules of Order book. But I think that Elizabeth's motion to amend the Materials Committee proposal was on the floor, and it was seconded. And then we had Joe's intervening motion. So let's go back to Elizabeth's motion to amend, and it was seconded. Let's vote on that amendment.
James and Kristen said the same.
And then before we move forward on that amended recommendation from the Materials Committee, we'll look at Joe's motion to table it. What were you going to say, Tom?
Basically, what Joe was saying, that we are just tabling the recommendation for the time being to see what the legal aspects are. Am I clear there?
Yeah, look, we've got to finish up Elizabeth's motion
Right.
regarding the recommendation.
And I can understand if that passes, we can table it and then clear this up from a legal aspect. All right? Clear the vote.
That helped, thank you. All right, so we'll vote on the amendment to the Materials Committee recommendation. All in favor of that, let's do it with a show of hands.
I'm so sorry, I think some of us need clarity on what we're voting on. We're voting just to amend the wording, the statement,
Yeah.
no further action.
That's right. We're amending the wording as she proposed
you see what I'm saying? Like, can we,
Yeah, I think the most significant questions, based on what I understand, and I think the work that we've done on this already, I think the elements of the policy around.
Joe, let me just interrupt just for a second, if you don't mind, before we get down another rabbit trail on that. I need to really handle her motion.
I'm good with that. We want to wait, yeah.
Then we can clarify your motion.
We're not gonna know what we're voting. I'm good with that. So we're voting on the original amendment language.
We're voting on whether her amendment to the material committee recommendation is what goes forward or not.
the reason I was asking is if we wanted to make any further amendments before we voted on it. That's what I meant. Before we voted on the amendments, we just made, are there any further amendments that we want to make?
Well, if you have some amendments to what she's asked, then are you proposing that?
Joe, are there portions of it that are in question that we should take it out and move forward on things that are not in question?
I don't think he's prepared to make enough amendments that it would move forward without being tabled in his estimation.
Yeah, I don't have a problem with, under motion one, I don't think there are significant concerns with, it's not a bullet point, but number one, I think we have, explicit descriptions or depictions of sexual acts, so on and so forth. That topic, and then there's a related definition to that. The definition is mixed, but the portion of the definition that relates to that, I think there's pretty well settled case law on that topic, which has actually been, this definition is lifted from. The same would apply to motion number 2, items 1 and 2. So item 1 is graphic depictions or descriptions of rape and pedophilia. Then item 2, graphic sexual depictions or descriptions. And then the related definition. So I think to the extent that we want to lift motion 1, number 2, and motion 2, number 3, and out of the policy, pass it as is, and come back, then, I mean, yeah, I think that's kind of what we're talking about. So, I'm open to that. I think that the primary concerns around the topic of gender ideology as it's worded.
You changed the wording in the amendment to gender identity.
I don't think that changes the concerns. I think the concern is that you're excluding a book from a section based on the topic solely of gender, regardless of whether it meets standards to be a children's book. So we're defining transgender as something that is, no matter how it's presented, never appropriate for children to see. And I think that is probably particularly problematic from a First Amendment standpoint. What's that? What it says.
But that's fine. We just want you to know that.
How am I reading into it? Like we're saying that anything that
We don't want to go there at this particular point.
I mean, my mind is open to be changed. You probably, I'm just trying to understand, what am I missing here?
Well, I'm missing where we are. So you've got Elizabeth's motion and a second on the floor for the amendment to the proposal. If I hear you right,
Your proposal needs to come down lower, lower, lower. You're trying to do something up here when you should be down here.
I didn't follow that either. So, if we go forward with this motion and we vote on that, whether to make that change, then at least we'll know where that stands. Let's do that. passes, but any more discussion on that? Okay, let's do it by the show of hands. Everybody who's in favor of the amendment to what the materials committee sent up as amended by, I don't know what happened to the microphone, as amended by Ms. Collins. Everybody who's in favor of her amendment, let's do it by a show of hands. Okay. And all that are opposed, show of hands. Okay. So, now we have the Materials Committee recommendation as amended on the floor. And we have a motion by Joe at this point to table the motion with those certain guidelines that he had earlier. And I think I just heard that as part of the discussion of this motion now, I think I just heard that Joe would be okay going forward with the Materials Committee recommendation if it took out the gender transition discussion, so that if your motion was refined to state that so much of the Materials Committee recommendation as deals with gender transition, if that were taken out and sent back to committee for clarification, you could support what's left.
Yes, that is correct.
Okay, so can we get a
I mean, I think it's just easier, probably to send the whole, keep the policy together.
It's not about what's easier on sending it all back. I want to, if you got a problem with some of it, you don't have a problem with some of it, let's pass what we don't have a problem with.
Well, okay, so do we know how many books in the collection this policy impacts?
I don't know, I don't care.
Do we know how many books in the collection are impacted by this policy? Any portion of
That's
it?
the whole reason for doing it as a policy, instead of as a each book individually, is we have a policy, and then that policy is applied to the collection. And I don't mean to sound flippant, I don't care. I mean, I don't care for purposes of how this policy is applied.
Well, I think we're enacting a policy, like this is what Congress does, and this is why nobody likes the way they do business. They routinely make policy without really actually knowing what their policies are going to do. And I think we have, to the extent that we don't have the capability to predict something, that's one thing, but to the extent that we haven't even used digital resources we have to understand how the impact of this policy, I think that's just bad policy making. Again, whether you agree with it or not. Like, for instance, Brian, I mean, we got an amendment on the floor, like Brian's already raised, like, we now can't have books in the kids section, which, that I think a lot of people that are actually for this policy want to be in the kids section, because they deal with gender, they affirm gender's biological sex, because it deals with the topic of gender. So that's kind of what I'm getting at is, again, like, policy's rushed, we're not taking time to think through it, we're not thinking through second and third order effects, and that, again, whether you're for or against the policy, that's just not good policy making.
Well, what I was suggesting is that if you don't like the gender transition language in this, that you refine your, amend your motion to to pass the parts of this that you do agree with. You just said that you do agree with the first point of materials that contain the following will not be included in the juvenile collection, and then the explicit depictions or descriptions of sexual acts, and then you didn't want to read the rest of it because nobody wants to read the rest of it. Okay? And then,
I don't have a problem reading the rest of it.
nobody wants to do it with a microphone in their face in front of this many people. If you do, more power to you, but, motion number 2, it seems like, materials that contain the following will not be included in the young adult collection, and then you said number 1, number 2 are good there. So it's, it appears that the, if your motion could be more, focused, so as to take out the parts that you feel like it's gonna be a problem going forward, then we could put that motion on the floor, and I think you've got a better, situation there.
Joe, in light of
What's that?
how much of this policy on sex would deal with the collection that we have some data on that. No, I can't give it to you specifically, but there's very few in the juvenile collection that would fall because of this.
You're talking about the sex topics.
Sex topics.
Yeah.
Sex topics. Okay. Very few. There are, however, a number that could come our direction that would be stopped by this policy. At the moment, we may have people who are relatively not going that particular direction who are dealing with books. But this is a policy to look at those who coming in the future might be doing, selecting the books. In the young adult discount collection, however, this will be a significant change. There are a number of books which are excruciatingly graphic regarding sexual encounters, if we want to think of it that way. It will take a number of books out of the collection.
As of last week, in our catalog, for juvenile and early reader, there were 15 books dealing with gender identity with that label in our catalog. But to speak to Ms. James' answer, one reason we probably would not know how many books would be affected is because the librarians do not read every single book that comes into the library. That's ridiculous. It's an unrealistic standard. But they do frequently review the books when there's a question about them. We are providing guidelines on how those books should be reviewed when they come up for review. We understand that we cannot recatalog every single book based on this policy, but we're providing guidelines for how books are reviewed when they come up for review.
I understand that. I think the point was when we're making a very significant policy change. Obviously, I'm not suggesting we need to have read every book. I think, as best I understand it, that line 1, motion 1, number 1, and number 2, I'll just say all of the stuff, excluding the topics that are related to what was originally worded as gender transition ideology and is now worded as material that deals with gender identity as a primary subject. I think, as Bill noted, the vast majority, if not all of the topics on graphic sex, etc., are probably largely dealt with under current policy, with the exception of the young adult section, which we have had issues from time to time in the past, and we have had those appropriately challenged through the process. My point is that I am concerned that we are, whether the policy is good or bad, it's not been thought through. This policy is again being changed. Like, clearly these amendments were planned. They were not communicated to, at least to me. Maybe I'm the only person that didn't know about it on the board prior to the meeting. And now we're supposed to vote on this. And I don't think we've even gone to the card catalog and said how many, if you put the word, I mean, I've done this, but hey, if you put the word, like I did it originally when we were talking about some other topics, if you put the word sex or transgender into the catalog, how many books pop up? And then if you, not reading the books, but sort through, right? Like, if you sort through the descriptions, some of those books will be not problematic. Like some books get tagged that way because the author is non-binary, even if the book has nothing to do with the topic.
Right.
So the point is, I don't think we've taken somewhat basic steps that we should have taken, and we're gonna create problems with, you know, and this is not like, hey, we need to do a 12-year study on the topic. I'm just saying, send it back to the committee or table it at the board level. I don't really care. And let's understand to the fullest extent that we can, and there's a limit on that, the impact of the policy, and then vote on it. Because otherwise we're voting on something that we're not exactly sure what's gonna happen, and I think that's problematic.
Yeah. Because I still go back to what Brian was saying, I worry about interpretation, and who's gonna be the person interpreting what falls under those guidelines. I think we need to go back to your motion of tabling it, because we need to look at the legal aspects of it, and we also need to make it more precise, to know exactly what you're talking about, and get some of the gray areas out of it.
My question is, are the gray areas only having to do with material that has to do with gender identity? And if we're all in support of motion 1.1, motion 2.1 and 2, is it possible for you to make an amendment and move forward on that portion of it, and the rest of the gender identity portion we can reevaluate?
I don't necessarily personally have any issues with that, but I don't know how we can know that there are gray areas when we haven't asked. Like, I mean, like we haven't, I don't think there are legal pitfalls, right? But has anybody on the board consulted counsel on any of the wording of any of these?
Yes.
Do we have written opinions on them?
No.
Okay, I don't personally have a problem with them, but I do think saying, well, let's pass it and then we'll find out and hope everything's okay is a bit problematic from a policy. This is about how the sausage gets made, not like whether or not I think there should be graphic novels in the young adult section. I mean, ultimately, I'm gonna leave the motion as is. If you guys wanna vote it down and do something different, then we can do that.
So, I'm sorry, one more question. Are you saying that if it impacted a lot of books, it would change your opinion on? I withdraw my question.
Okay, we have the motion on the floor that's Joe's, seconded by Brian. Best thing for us to do is vote on that motion at this point, to decide whether this is a motion to table everything and send it back to committee, with a time limit on it, which I think was it 30 days?
That would be a minimum of 30 days to allow collection development staff to provide input. And then I don't think we can time limit legal review because we can't control that. So I think that the other stipulation would be, hey, when it comes back, we need to have an opinion on it. So if we can get that done in 15 days, great. But
Okay, so just to be clear, we're not voting on what to do with the, on whether this goes forward or not in the amended form. Now, we're voting, that wasn't very clear, I'm sorry, I didn't say that well. Yeah. We're voting as to whether to table the amended Materials Committee recommendation. And if this passes, then the Materials Committee recommendation is tabled for 30 days while we look into it. If this fails, then we can go forward with a subsequent motion to take some or all of this forward and table parts of it. But he's leaving his motion as is for the time being. That clear to everybody?
Should we
Okay.
say rather than 30 days? Should we say rather than 30 days, our next meeting?
hopefully.
And,
Okay.
you know, we can't make it, we can't make it, but that's.
Yeah, I think some type of time limit, or we gotta keep this thing moving, that's.
All right.
The next meeting is April 24th.
Okay, so, motion on the floor, is everybody clear what the motion on the floor is? Okay, let's, everybody in favor of Joe's motion, raise your hand. One, two, three, four. Okay, all opposed to Joe's motion, raise your hand. Okay, motion fails. Do I hear any other motions regarding current?
I would motion that we would amend the amended language to strike section 2, under the first motion, material that deals with gender identity as a primary subject, to completely strike that in the language, and section, or number 3 under motion 2, the same wording. Make a motion that we strike those.
Are you making the motion that we strike those and we send it back to committee to review?
Well, I would just move that we strike them, and the committee can still take it up at its own discretion if it wants to revise it.
Okay, Brian's got a motion on the table, on the floor. Got a second on it? Anybody unclear on what his motion is?
One more time.
I move that we strike, in the amended language, under motion 1, number 2, material that deals with gender identity as a primary subject, that we just completely strike that wording out. Likewise, under motion 2, number 3, same wording, material that deals with gender identity as a primary subject, that we strike that language out, leave the other language as is, and then if the material committee wants to call a meeting to provide clarification and try and readdress that language, that's up to the library materials committee.
I want to move that we accept this policy, the limited motion, the changes that Ryan just made. Motion 1.1, and then motion 2.1 and 2, and we accept that as a policy moving forward.
It sounds like you're making a motion to amend his motion.
No, to keep your motion, but to accept everything else. So we made the amendments, and then we move forward with everything else.
That's essentially my same motion.
Okay, then, yeah, sorry.
Okay, so we have the motion and we have it seconded, I think. Ken seconded. All right.
Moving on point 2 on any discussion in the agenda section. I can't hear you.
Do we get the, I assume we're including the related definitional elements that pertain to the stricken portion?
Yeah, that was already stricken under Elizabeth's prior amendment, so I'm amending her amendment.
All right.
So just for clarification, you're saying we keep everything except the ones that you just struck out?
When you do that, you're taking out for the purpose of this policy, material is considered graphic of a person applying a particular community standard relating to depiction or description of sexual conduct. What'd you say?
That still remains. We kept that.
That remains.
Yeah.
Okay, because the sentence at the end was already deleted.
So, but for the purpose of this policy, materials, that whole definition stays.
Right, yeah, I'm not suggesting an amendment to that.
Okay. I think this may be the time to read what is on the table.
Are you asking me to read it when Brian is proposing an amendment? Are you asking me to read his thing?
Yeah, read the Materials Committee recommendation as it would read after Brian's motion is applied.
So it would read materials that contain not be included in the juvenile collection. Explicit descriptions or depictions of sexual acts, including vaginal, anal, oral, masturbation, incest, or pedophilia. For the purposes of this policy, materials considered graphic if a person applying contemporary community standards relating to the depiction or description of sexual conduct would find that the portion of material appeals to the prurient interest and/or the material could be considered gratuitous sex because it involved descriptions or depictions of carnal detail of a sexual act or encounter. Materials excluded by the above criteria will be included in the Parenting and Early Childhood PEC collection. Motion 2, materials that contain the following will not be included in the young adult collection. Graphic depictions or descriptions of rape or pedophilia. Graphic sexual depictions or descriptions. For the purposes of this policy, materials considered graphic if a person applying contemporary community standards relating to the depiction or description of sexual conduct would find that the portion of material appeals to the prurient interest and/or the material can be considered gratuitous sex because it involves descriptions or depictions of carnal detail of a sexual act or encounter. Materials excluded by the above criteria will be included in the adult collection.
Okay, everybody got what we got now on the floor? Got to vote on Brian's amendment, yes. Okay, so is everybody clear what's going to be left after Brian's amendment? Okay? All in favor of Brian's amendment? Raise your hands. Okay? All opposed? Four. Okay? So we have that on the floor now. So if everybody is ready to vote on the Materials Committee recommendation as amended, all in favor of that, raise your hand. Okay, it's unanimous. Thank you. All right, is there anything else? I mean, that wasn't enough.
Should we send the Materials Committee back to consider previous materials, or should we?
Yeah, as Brian says, the Materials Committee is free to call a meeting and address those issues, which I would, says yes, they do. Thank you. Okay. We have some public comment, and we took a page from County Council's procedures, and we're gonna read one person from the against the motion that we had today, and one person from the for the motion that we have. We'll do that until we run out of 30 minutes. And I've got 126 or so. So we'll go from there. The first person on the against is Miles Dane.
Good afternoon. Before I begin my written remarks, I would encourage the library to consider looking into ways to avoid the logjam of a line we had out there this morning, and maybe take a page from County Council and find a way to do online signups. So here we are again. There are, unfortunately, some members in this room who see this library as a public institute, who do not see this library as a public institution, but rather as a tool to promote and enforce their own private beliefs. There are some other members of the community here who hope to remind you that Greenville is a conservative community. While Greenville may be perceived as a conservative community, it is important to recognize that there is a diversity of opinions and perspectives within any community. Further, it is important to avoid labeling or stereotyping communities based on political beliefs or affiliations, as this can create divisions and reinforce biases. Our government is set up precisely to ensure that all voices are heard and respected, not just those in the majority. Marsha Mostyn claims in her own words, by relocating material to the adult sections, we are putting the responsibility in the hands of parents. Those who do not want their child to have it won't, and those who do can easily grant access. This is simply not true. If that was what she really cared about, we wouldn't be here today because multiple library policies already state that parents are responsible for what their children borrow. To claim that the library should remove age-appropriate children's and teens' books from the areas they belong in, Marsha and other proponents of censorship are declaring that they support lazy parenting. These censors and parents don't want to be involved in what their children read. They just want to be involved in telling other kids and teens what they cannot read and other parents what they cannot borrow. Relocation is censorship. You cannot claim to support parental rights and then strip the rights of LGBTQ parents and their children, or even straight and cisgender parents. Teens, children, and their parents deserve to be able to borrow books with a diverse range of characters and themes without having to visit a separate part of the library. Separate but equal was a lie 60 years ago, and it's a lie today. There is a choice some of you have to make today. Do you wish to be remembered 60 years from now as an extremist who chose censorship? Do you want historians to look at photos of these meetings and describe how you actively fought against the democratic principles of our nation and attacked the First Amendment? Do you want people to wonder how you could have such hatred for LGBTQ people? What legacy do you want to leave for your children and grandchildren? Will they be proud of your actions today or ashamed? The choice is yours, but the choice is not free from scrutiny and consequences, both now and in the future. Thank you.
I get letters, and I don't respond to public comments for the most part on this occasion, because a lot of the letters that I get and the comments that I get talk about how we hate the LGBTQ community, and nothing could be further from the truth. You know, this board does nothing. I've never heard anybody on this board say in private or in public that they hate the LGBT community. Or
I walked in the parking lot.
and I can't let that go unanswered. And I understand if you don't like what we propose. I understand if you think that our actions are misguided from your standpoint, but none of us hate the LGBTQ community. That is a fact.
That man told me I was not wrong. Right there.
Second speaker today,
Excuse me, you replied to me.
Wadsworth.
You harassed staff at the TR.
I did not harass the staff. That's the other big lie that came out, that I don't answer this stuff because it doesn't make any difference for the most part, but I did not harass the staff at the TR
Yes,
branch.
you did.
And so that's just none of you were there.
I was
so-
harassed in the parking lot.
All right, so the second person is, to speak is Beth Wadsworth.
Today, we need to discuss what's inappropriate. It's inappropriate to expose our children to gay, lesbian, and transgender books at our local libraries. One of the books that I looked into is called Sex is a Funny Word, author Corey Silverberg. This book teaches our children all about sex education that is inclusive of lesbian, gay, and bisexual experiences, as well as gender creative and gender non-conforming children. Our gay and lesbian community want to teach inappropriate sex education to our young children. What is appropriate? It's very simple and easy to understand. We want the gay, lesbian, and transgender books moved away from the children's book area and put with the adult section. It's sad that in a conservative state, we have to compromise on on this subject. Personally, I would have them removed altogether and thrown away. 3% make up our gay and lesbian population. 97% are heterosexual. We will not allow 3% to change our family values. 3% want to dictate the rules regarding how our children think and learn. Our children are not for sale. We will fight for them, protect them, and do whatever is necessary to keep them from seeing these inappropriate books. Children belong to their families, not to the gay and lesbian community. We won't allow them to be indoctrinated with their lifestyle. Let me be very clear. South Carolina is a conservative state with traditional family values. We want our children to have carefree childhood. So leave our children alone and take your liberal agenda home with you. We don't want it. Everyone here today was conceived by a man and a woman. You wouldn't be standing or sitting here without that union. The majority don't believe in this pretend world you live in. We live in the reality of a true family unit. Mom, dad, and their children. We are raising our children to be strong in the same beliefs. So don't try and open this perverted window through the storybooks. Evil preaches tolerance until it is dominant. Then it tries to silence good. We stand for solid moral values, decency, and condemn these inappropriate children's books. Thank you.
I don't know, I forgot to, you made it with 3 seconds to spare on that last one, but I forgot to mention that it's 3 minutes.
All right, hello. My name is Andrew, and I'm a lifelong resident of Greenville County. And I grew up coming to this public library. Right next door, in fact, when it used to be what is now the Children's Museum. As a student at Haynesworth Private School, barely a mile from where we stand, I and my fellow elementary schoolers would load up into the school van every so often and drive over. We'd check out books, we'd be read to by librarians, and I have really fond memories of those times. There, I would read Animorphs. I'd read Harry Potter. I checked out a copy of Trapped in the Slick Rock Canyon more times than I can remember. I loved that book. In those books, I read a lot about kids that looked like me. They came from the same types of places I did. They had crushes on the same types of kids that looked a whole lot like the kids that I had crushes on. And in that way, I felt seen. I could sympathize with their stories. In a fundamental sense, those stories let me know that I was not alone. I think all kids deserve that experience. They need that experience. To have the joy of seeing yourself in literature, down to what you think is your most guarded qualities. At times that my thoughts about the Greenville County Library System were stuck there in 1998. I wish that I could think about this place and smile, but unfortunately I cannot. I can't talk or think about GCLS with a smile because I spend time with your librarians. I go to their houses on weekends, I celebrate the births of their children, I come home every day to a GCLS librarian who is the love of my life. GCLS, as I can tell you, has been told to me countless times, has a fundamental distrust of their librarians. We require that they get specialized degrees in librarianship and then promptly tell them they cannot utilize those degrees in any meaningful way. How embarrassing. How utterly shameful that we allow unvetted, unverified, untrained, and unqualified individuals rule at this level over our librarians who went to school for this. Well, I have a bit of information for the people on this board. And this is not a promise, and it's certainly not a threat. What I have for everybody on this board is a spoiler. If this amendment goes back to review and makes it in and passes, your job is going to get very hard. Your job is going to get exponentially, life-changingly harder with the passing of this resolution. If your goal is to pass this motion and have that be the end of it, you are critically mistaken. I have more time, more stamina, and more give a damn for this than you could possibly imagine, and the best part is I am not alone. Thank you for your time.
Sheila Kinney, Kinne. I'm known for mispronouncing names, I'm sorry.
Thank you, Lord. Last fall, I spent a lot of time, in the Travelers Rest branch of the Greenville County Libraries. My boys were playing football in the neighboring field, and I would sit in the evenings and do my Bible study. I was typically alone in the library with one librarian, or perhaps there might be one or two other people. It was not a very vibrant place. Of course, I noticed the dramatic banned books display, and I rolled my eyes and thought, well, this place is woke. Making taxpayer-funded libraries into places of political protest is stupid and short-sighted. You see, I used to spend my time in what was once an amazing, beautiful central library in downtown Minneapolis. If you visit today, you'll surely be greeted by more than a couple of men viewing porn on the computers and the strong smell of urine. It's a tragedy. The slippery slope of leftist politics in a city is very real. I'm here today to commend the Board of Trustees for taking the steps needed to protect children and to represent Greenville as a conservative community that it is. Trump won here with over 60% of the vote. I want to thank Chairman Allen Hill for telling the staff, whether maybe he didn't now, I don't know, the Travelers Rest Library to knock it off with their handouts, telling children how to get their hands on obscene books like Gender Queer without their parents' knowledge. I want to thank Elizabeth Collins and Marcia Mostyn, who handled the LGBT bullies a couple weeks ago with grace at the last subcommittee meeting. It's funny that the Greenville News failed to report the few of us that were there in opposition to the protesters. It's almost as if you have the same agenda. In researching the books in question, I think it's ridiculous that many of these books are even in the Greenville libraries, let alone a click away as e-books online. I wish that many of these books were gone from this library, as they're disgusting and obscene. The fact that in 2023 America, we're talking about simply moving and not removing these books from the library is a sad commentary on our culture. It used to be a common American value to protect children, not to confuse or to sexualize them. But of course, this attack on the nuclear family is decades old now, and while the LGBT Rainbow Pride movement may rule academia, Hollywood, big corporate America, and the news media, it's not going to rule here in Greenville, South Carolina. This is a very red county and a very red state, where we elected a conservative county council who appoints this board to represent the community. If this library wants to be a vibrant meeting place like this, filled like this every day, and it's not, full of families and children, it needs to immediately get all of the politics out of here. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
My name is Tori Cheryl, and I work at the Travelers Rest branch. I work at the Travelers Rest branch. Mr. Hill might recognize me as one of the employees who was working when he came in to try and get us to take down part of our banned books display last September. You said earlier that nobody was here, you weren't a bully, you were a bully. You were a bully. I'm here today to talk about the increasing harassment and discrimination GCLS employees have been subjected to over the past 6 months. Since the incident with Mr. Hill, certain members of the public have seemed to feel empowered to harass staff and make our jobs a living hell. You all are aware that the cops have been called on us multiple times because it's been widely reported on the news, but there are other incidents that have not appeared in the news. In January, I put up a cozy romance display with only queer books. I was told I could keep the queer theme, but I couldn't label it queer in an effort to mitigate pushback from the public. That did not work. About halfway through the display's run, a patron came in and stole 7 books from the shelf and hid them throughout the library. When I discovered what had happened, I was furious. I spent the rest of the day crawling on my hands and knees, looking under shelves and behind books, trying to find the missing romances. I did eventually find them all, but did administration do anything about this incident? No. Did they do anything when it happened with another romance display a month later? Again, no. Most recently, this past week, somebody stole Daddy and Dada from our juvenile staff mix display and hid it behind the Shakespeare section in the adult nonfiction. Again, I fully expect no response or acknowledgement from our leadership. Also in January, after the queer romance display was cycled out, we found out that an email had been circulated in certain conservative circles with a picture of the display and text outright calling my manager a groomer. The day after we were made aware of this email, Councilman Steve Shaw came in to look for it. It had already been taken down, but one can only assume that if it had still been up, he would have demanded we take it down, just like Mr. Hill did with our Banned Books Week display. Since last fall, we have been called groomers and pedophiles. We have been harassed and bullied, and you have done nothing about it. Instead, you have spent your time writing unnecessary policies and reviewing picture books. This is not how a library board is supposed to function. Your job is to support staff as we seek to serve our community, but you have done the opposite, and you should feel ashamed of yourselves.
Pick up, Ms. James. Pick up, somebody. Pick up, Ms. James.
Well, the personal, yeah, Miss Sheriff. Are you still there? You remember when I came to your library, did I demand that you take down
You did, sir.
No,
You
ma'am.
did, sir.
You remember when I said, you'll be getting a call in the morning from someone in Maine, and they'll be talking about that brochure.
Did not.
No more boy. Speak up, Ms. James.
All right, well, we all remember,
Speak up, Ms. James.
I went up to the library because I got a lot of phone calls and emails about a brochure that was up there on the desk at the library. And when I saw what was on the brochure, I spoke to.
You should be letting the public speak. You're taking time away from.
Thank you. Thank you. Speak up, Ms. James. Speak up, Beverly James. Speak up, Beverly James.
Thank you.
Next name.
So I have the other option I have is to extend the time by whatever time I take.
That'd be a nice thing to do since you're taking up time.
Thank you.
Speaking of phone, enough. Enough.
I've been called a lot of things, but a bully and all the other stuff that I supposedly stormed into the branch and bullied people. I think it might have been Miss Cheryl that said that was the worst night of her entire life. Was that you, Miss Cheryl?
I'm not used to that.
Because somebody said that was the worst night of their entire life. And if that was the worst night, they've had a wonderful life, what I told them. Because the worst night of their life is when I show up should the chairman of the library board go to a library branch where they've been receiving complaints from? I submit yes. Okay? And I didn't make any orders. I said, we'll be getting a phone call from the main branch regarding these brochures they were handing out. And everybody saw the brochures. So, I'm able to take the name calling and all that, but it's just the lying about it is just really sad.
You're a liar.
Thank you.
We want to hear from the executive director.
Okay, Diane Mitchell is next, I think.
Good afternoon, and thank you for serving our community on the library board. I'm Diane Mitchell. I'm born and raised in Greenville, graduated from Hampton High School, attended Furman, spent 14 years away from Greenville getting graduated. We got married, lived in Colorado for 12 years, where my 3 children were born. Realizing the progressive direction that Colorado was going in culture and in education, my husband and I made the choice and financial sacrifice to return to Greenville to raise our young children in a conservative community. We are so glad we did. The culture and community reaffirmed our traditional values of morality, marriage, and family. They had a wonderful childhood now here and are now happily married and contributing to our community. Greenville is still a conservative community, as reflected by the elected officials in this county who are largely conservative Republicans. What is a conservative anyway? Politically, being conservative is one who wants to preserve our republic system of government with boundaries in place. Morally, being a conservative is one who wants to preserve objective truth, not one's personal truth, as if truth could be changed. Personal opinion can change, but there is only a mutable objective truth. For thousands of years across the world and major religions of the world, there existed recognition of observable, distinct, and immutable difference between male and female human beings and many other species. Biology is not bigotry. It is objective truth. As adults, live your life the way you see fit, but the sexualization of our children must stop. I have read through the children need to be protected from. My grandchildren are 7, 5, and 2. They are innocent and unaware of these issues, and that is the way I want to keep them. So I don't bring them to the library anymore, specifically because of displays that I've seen like that. This is the library my tax dollars go to pay for, and I cannot use it. Children depend on us to lead. Children depend on us to protect their innocence. Children cannot consent to sex until they are adults for their protection. So why are we teaching them about sexual matters so early? Let's protect their innocence. Getting feedback from the American Library Association is like asking Planned Parenthood their advice on pro-life amendments. Monica Klein is the organization leader of It Takes a Family and is a former comprehensive health educator for Planned Parenthood. She exposes that for decades, Planned Parenthood has been teaching children how to have safe sex and how to alienate their parents. I encourage you to look up that organization. Jennifer Violet, not considered a conservative, I heard an interview with her last night, discovered the idea of transgenderism being pushed top down. Check out the money trail.
My name is Susan Ward. I'm the president of P-Flag Greenville. I sincerely hope, for all of your sakes, that I am the only person in this room who has survived losing a child to suicide. The life I was living and the woman I was before that day in June 2017, those were obliterated when my world exploded. When I got a phone call from my husband that gives me flashbacks even now as I'm telling you about it. It's been said that no parent should outlive a child. When it's suicide, well, no one even wants to think about that, but it did happen in my family, and I don't have the option of ignoring teen suicide as an issue. Some of the folks in the audience here have heard me tell my story before. All of you out there in front of me have. Sometimes people wonder how I can stand up and talk about it. Maybe you wonder why I do. It's because I believe life is precious. I value your life, whether or not you love me as your neighbor. I value your children's lives, no matter what you've raised them to believe. I wish them the joy of growing into their full potential, happy, healthy, thriving. But some of you, when you hear that my surviving son is transgender, do not wish the same for him. And you definitely don't wish it for any young person in Greenville County who, like my son, belongs to the LGBTQ community. You don't want them to be supported. You don't want them to feel affirmed. You want to think that, like the books affected by this policy, these kids can be put on a shelf where no one will see them. Truth is, though, opposing these kids the way you do, even the act of coming here today to publicly conduct this fight, endangers lives. Because however much you wish it weren't so, some children are LGBTQ. Statistics say up to 20% or more of Gen Z. You are sending these innocent children the message that their existence is dangerous, shameful, something to be hidden, that you think the world would be better without them, and you're willing to stand up and say so. You on this board,
You, Marsha Mostyn, you are an adult in a position of power, harming vulnerable children. I am never going to stop standing up for all children, but especially for LGBTQ children. To them, I say, I see you. You are needed, you belong, you are enough exactly as you are. There's a whole loving community here fighting for you. And to you who support censorship and the relocation of these books so no children will see them, books that simply reflect the reality of different kinds of people and families in our Greenville County communities, I say, shame on you.
Respectfully, Board, I stand here as a political science major in UF, but I'm not a future politician. I stand here as a Greenville County nominated Teacher of the Year for my school, but first and foremost, I'm a parent. And one of the books that I shared with my students is Stand Tall, Molly Lomel. It was a story that I also shared with my son. And the reason why is this. Because in this story, Stand Tall, Molly Lou Mellon, it talks about a young lady who her grandmother spoke identity to. Her grandmother spoke to her that when others share, society shares that they are something that they're not, which she experienced in school, she was able to stand tall. And as I stand tall today, I share that I did not have parents who would speak identity to me. I did not have a mother. I did not have a father. But as an educator with a master's degree in education, I chose that major because I understood that reading was my window to the world. It was how I found myself. It was in those 12 years old times where I wanted to figure out who was I, because I did not get the same information that I needed at such an impressionable age. I read books. I understand that books are powerful. And as an educator, I made sure that those books that I exposed my kids to would speak life to them. And that life is to stand tall in who God created you to be. And that is the message that I have today. That just as Molly Lou Mellon had her grandmother speak identity to her, leave it to the parents. I don't want to come in here and have my 3 sons, my 2 sons, and my daughter come here and and pick up a book that would speak to them, something that they're not. I want them to stand tall in the reality of what I speak at home. You, Ariella, are a woman, future woman who will be fierce in this world. You, Judah and Callum, are men. They will stand tall in the identity that God gave them. And I am sharing with them books that will speak to that end. I did not have that growing up. I understand the power of the books that I read. And some of those books actually led me in a direction that I did not want to go. That would be destructive, even as a mom today, to my kids. Right is right and wrong is wrong, and I've made mistakes. And I stand tall today as someone who has risen from those mistakes in desire for us to rise in knowing our identity. I am not a future politician. I am not just a former educator who is now a stay-at-home, work-at-home mom, teaching my kids to stand tall. I am a child of God.
Thank you. Next person is Elizabeth Sergio.
It's Sergio. My name is Elizabeth Sergio. I am a licensed therapist and therapist supervisor. I am the founder and CEO of Amaryllis Counseling, a queer affirmative mental health clinic co-founder and president of 864 Pride, a clinical nonprofit addressing disparities in healthcare, and co-founder of the Queer Wellness Center, a location where queer folks can connect with life-saving resources. I am here because on Wednesday, March 15th, I received my first of 2 emails directly from Marsha Austin, who I believe accidentally mistook me for the other Elizabeth here. A direct quote from the body of her email says, "It's messy because I am so sick of these books." Attached to the email, she provided her proposal to address 2 main issues. In this proposal, Marsha categorized being queer, meaning gender expansive, trans, gay, lesbian, etc., along with rape, violence, and drug use, stating many parents don't expect or want that kind of content to be accessed by their child. I genuinely don't understand why I have to take time out of my incredibly busy day away from my patients to tell you how wildly inappropriate, ignorant, and offensive this is. These statements are a symptom of heteronormativity and cisnormative thinking that refers to the belief that everyone is straight and everyone identifies with the sex they were assigned at birth. Symptoms of this type of thinking that we see here, happening right now, result in sensationalizing, sexualizing, objectifying, fetishizing, and projecting perversion onto anything that isn't straight or cis. Other symptoms include projecting wholesomeness onto cis and hetero couples, and censoring acknowledgement of anything other than cis and hetero people. Not everyone is heterosexual or a cisgender person. Other people exist. I encourage you to educate yourself. In this day and age, there is no excuse acceptable for this level of absolute ignorance. Marsha, I speak directly to you. As a therapist, our highest calling is to act with trauma-informed care. This means understanding the power dynamic you hold as the authority in your room and interacting with individuals who look to you in a manner that creates safety, fosters trust, and strengthens your sense of empowerment. This is what we expect from all members of leadership. You have used your platform of authority and wielded it as a weapon against the marginalized and the vulnerable. Shame on you. Take back what little honor you may be able to scrape together and step down. I speak now to the library board and look to you to hold all members of your board accountable for their actions, expecting standards of respect in communications and behaviors, and remove Marsha. Whatever it is that you choose to do next reflects directly on your character and the character of the city of Greenville. We deserve better.
Thank you. Thank you. Yeah. No bullying, boys. No bullying.
My name is Idell Corey. Can you hear me okay? I think I said in the audience, and I heard you accept and pass the recommendation from the subcommittee. You're going to move the books, right? Is that correct?
What we passed was everything that the subcommittee suggested, but the part that dealt with gender identity was tabled for later time.
Okay.
But any of the books regarding sex and all the things that listed, those are going to be moved to the adult section.
Okay, I want to thank you for moving them. I'm not here to express hate to anybody or to ban anything. And that's not me. I don't have a cell in my body that's a hateful cell. And I've been a teacher for 30 years, and my students know that, and my parents know that too. I am not here to ban books, period. But I am here to speak about community standards. Somebody in here on the board talked about community standards, and we are Greenville County. Our community standards are conservative. Our community standards they're pro-traditional family, and that's why I'm here. And our taxpayers in Greenville County pay for the Greenville County Council, and the community should reflect the taxpayers. We are very conservative as a community, as a county, we are very conservative. And you should vote on behalf of the people that appointed you and were elected by us, taxpayers. I have a little more time. I don't have prepared statement, but I have a little more time. I worked on the Hill, and I was going to be tolerant and understanding when I worked for a Democrat, okay? A long time ago. I was going to go to the gay bar and be tolerant and understanding of everybody. And I heard stories of mutilation, of cutting, and things I cannot even repeat. I was going to allow the people to talk to me. And I left there, I left the bar. I left the bar thinking these people are not gay, they're hurting people, and we need to reach out in love and accept them and let them know that there's an alternative, that the gay community is not a political community. You're done. Okay.
Thank you. Okay, that's 10 minutes over the 30 minutes makeup for the part that I used. And we had 5 against and 5 for speakers, so that works well when we get from both sides, not just who got here first.
Could you give more than the half hour? What's holding you back from giving us more time?
My life.
Our lives matter. Our lives matter too.
We have a volunteer board, and we expect the volunteer board to give us the 2 hours for the meeting once a month, and then for committee meetings that we also have. And we want to be respectful of their time. And I'm sorry, we get 30 minutes just like everybody. Thank you.
May we hear from Beverly James? She's a paid employee. Beverly James is not a volunteer. Beverly James, please.
Thank you. All in favor, say aye. All opposed, same sign.